Okay, there we go.
Thank
So, what is your name?
My name is Hadiza Hamza.
Esther.
Yes.
Wow. How did you get named Esther as like a namesake or?
Well, I happen to come from a family that values its Christian values, and even though I was born into a predominantly Muslim part of Nigeria in West Africa, it is very important for us Christians to be able to identify ourselves. And usually a child would be given a Christian name, which we would use as a middle name, even though our first and last names sound very Islamic. But by our middle names, we'll know that we're Christians.
Amen. And where did you grow up? Describe the town, or you grew up in a small town?
I grew up in a very small town. I was born the daughter of two teachers who were both children of farmers. And we come from a very remote part of Nigeria in the mountains by the Sambisa forest. And the part of the world we come from doesn't really have much to offer anyone. But by the grace of God, Christian missionaries landed there back in the late 1800s. And these are missionaries from, believe it or not, Elgin, Illinois, who were members of the Church of the Brethren, who originally were a breakaway faction of a church in Germany.
Okay.
And this particular group of people, for some reason, when the partition of Africa was going on with the Portuguese, the British, and every civilization on earth, this particular group of people chose to go into Nigeria, and the Cameroons. And that is how Christianity reached that very remote part of Africa. And so my parents ended up being the recipients of Western education that had been handed down from the 1800s, from their great-grandparents through their grandparents, and then down to them.
Do you have any fond memories of your childhood?
Oh yes, I do. Yes, I do. Little village girl, running around, no shoes. Yes, I do. And just grandparents who, believed in the Lord. And my grandmother actually taught me almost everything I know about Jesus at a very young age. And I'm the oldest of 9, and communal living, just beautiful. Everybody sleeping on the floor, on mats, and rolling them up in the morning and going up to do whatever you're doing. It was a very simple, very quiet, very beautiful life.
Where did you go to school?
Because my parents were school teachers, they traveled a lot. Because back in the 1960s, when I was born, my father taught in a school in another state. So eventually we had to leave where my grandparents lived and migrated down to his teaching areas. And so I ended up growing up between Zaria in the middle, in the central part of Nigeria, and Kano. It's another city very close to that area. And these are all predominantly 90% Islamic states. So I have fond memories of my father's teaching career, and my mother, and a lot of their students whom I also interacted with. And my mother ended up becoming a librarian. I guess teaching wasn't quite her thing. And so I guess things just progressed from there.
What was it like living from a interfaith perspective, or just a faith perspective, living as a Christian in a Islamic world? Maybe the world was different back when you were growing up.
Extremely different. I remember in the early 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, Christians and Muslims in the part of Nigeria I came from, we coexisted, we lived together. There were families that were mixed like mine, Islamic, Christian. Fridays, get up and go to the mosque. Sundays, all of us would troop down to church. There was no dichotomy between who was a Christian, who was a Muslim. Most of the Christians and Muslims intermarried, and children were treated, the same. Unfortunately, in the late 1980s, I remember there was a difference in the whole atmosphere in the areas where we come from. There was a new brand of Islamic teaching that was coming out of Egypt, Libya, Algeria, and parts of Saudi Arabia. And disciples were being sent from these areas into Kano and Zaria, in the areas where I lived in. And all of a sudden, there was a brand of Islamic adherents who did not want to intermingle with other faiths. All of a sudden, I learned I was an infidel and probably didn't qualify for certain things because I wasn't Muslim. I remember all of a sudden my father having to move from that part of Nigeria where we had lived for years and years and on end back to our home state because he couldn't get a promotion at his job or he couldn't get further because he wasn't a Muslim. I remember all of a sudden it wasn't okay for me to be in certain areas because I wasn't Muslim. And this wasn't how I grew up. It was a different Nigeria compared to the one I was born into.
And as you look at your own faith journey, do you remember a time when you really sort of embraced after childhood, was there a time when you really sort of claimed your Christian identity, or did you have mentors that really helped shape your faith, or can you share a little bit about your own faith journey?
My own faith journey, actually, I guess being born into a home that is semi-Christian, I assumed I was a Christian. But by the time I went into college...
Where was that?
I went to the University of Benin. That's when I went to medical school. By the time I went to college, I found myself going to an Anglican church where there was a pretty radical pastor that they had there who was not just all about ceremony and about the ceremonial Christian who went to the mosque on Friday and who ended up in church on Sunday. I remember particularly the sermon he preached. Choose ye this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And it made an impression on me that probably the Christianity I was claiming to live wasn't exactly what it should be. And maybe it was time for me to actually declare who I really was. Was I going to continue to be this lukewarm Christian who, out of probably wanting to be politically correct, wanted to respect values of two different religions? Or was it time for me to plant my feet on the ground and say, this is who I am? And I remember leaving that Anglican church feeling very different from how I'd gone in. And I think for me, that was the defining moment for me, as that there was a higher calling for me as a Christian to declare who I was.
How old were you?
I was at the time
19,
22 years
22,
old.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. And you're in the United States now. At some point you moved West Africa and came here. Tell us about that journey.
Yes, that journey actually, in my wildest dreams, I never imagined I would be in the United States. It was never part of the plans I had for myself. Finishing medical school, I met a Peace Corps, a member of the Peace Corps from the United States. And a little romance developed, and we got married. and came to the United States. He's originally from Iowa, Oskaloosa, Iowa, little Swedish community there. It was it was a journey I never prepared myself for, and at the time I just finished medical school, and wasn't quite ready. I did come to the United States for a few months just to see what it was all about. Now I'm very familiar with the United States because both parents of mine had actually come to Illinois and then later Ohio State University. My father graduated from
Who lost the other day, by the way.
Exactly, correct. That is right. So that was how I ended up in the United States. I lived in Oskaloosa, Iowa, and
that had to have been different.
Very different, very different. My ex-husband was, his parents owned a hog farm, and it's a peaceful, beautiful life. It reminded me a lot of how I was raised.
Yeah, it might have been more similar. It's
exactly.
Actually small town kind of village.
Very, very small town. I found myself very comfortable and actually very, very happy to be there because it reminded me of my own childhood and how I'd grown up. And unfortunately, that marriage didn't last very long. So after 3 years, I left, went back to Nigeria.
Were you a doctor yet?
Yes, I was a full physician.
Okay. And so, all right, I'm sorry, keep going. I interrupted you.
Yes, I was a physician, but unfortunately, with the medical community in the United States, it's very different. You don't just get up, you don't just leave your country and come here to practice. You have to go through certain hoops, pass a couple of exams here and there. It takes about 2-3 years for you to qualify to be a physician here.
So you're in Iowa, then you go back to Nigeria, but you're still here.
Yes.
So the journey continues.
So the journey continues. So the journey continues, and I found myself in New York City doing my residency at the Flushing Hospital, Queens, and after my residency, after 9/11, I found myself in Nevada.
Because of 9/11, do you think?
Specifically because of 9/11. My hospital had been called upon to volunteer.
Which
after
hospital?
9/11. Flushing Hospital, Queens.
Okay.
And I think there's just so much a person can take, even though that is the chosen path for you. For me, seeing body parts coming in rather than human beings that, rather than the wounded and, the sick or the, that you thought you'd be treating. I think it tilted me the other way, and I couldn't, I guess I just couldn't take it after that.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I needed to leave New York. And the first place that offered me a job was Nevada. And
when was that?
This was back in 2002.
Okay.
And I came here to do a 1-year contract, and I've been here ever since.
How long have you been a part of New Song?
I've been a part of New Song for the last 5 years. I was actually introduced to the church by neighbors of mine, David Ollip and his family. And at first they brought the children to church because I worked a lot on weekends and on Sundays. So, and I just moved away from the neighborhood where I lived. So my neighborhood church was a little too far for us to drive to. So David Ollip and his wife brought the children to church. And I didn't even know that it was this particular church. But one day I was driving past New Song Church and I saw the 3 crosses. And I said to myself, I have to go in there to see why 3 crosses. They must be 3 times the sinner I am. Otherwise, every church I know has 1 cross and they have 3. So I drove in here and met Pastor Dave, who I assumed was the janitor because he was doing some clean up. So when I walked in, I told him, I know my kids have been attending a church around here. I don't know exactly which one. I'm assuming it's this one. can I talk to anybody about this church? And he said, I could help you. And I said, no, I want to talk to a member, not, because I. So Pastor Dave said, okay, give me a minute. So he went into the bathroom, washed his hands, came out, shook my hands. Because at that point, I didn't want to even shake his hands because he looked very dirty. And he introduced himself as the pastor of the church. You can imagine my embarrassment. And I later found out his family had spent time he'd actually grown up in East Africa. His family were missionaries there. And so he started to call me cousin. And so I figured, well, I guess my children had already attended the church with David Olive. And here was the pastor of the church calling me cousin. So I guess I didn't have a choice. I had to come to New York.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be.
Yeah. As you look at, that's an amazing story. As you look at the Christian church, as you experienced it in Nigeria and here in Henderson, are there similarities and differences, or things that you celebrate in the Nigerian church and things that you celebrate here in America?
As I look at the Christian faith through two continents, I see that at the end of the day, all Christians are the same. We all want the same thing. We all believe in the same God. However, I am thankful for the peace and the serenity that the United States has been able to give me to practice my faith. Back in Nigeria, there are places and areas where you were afraid to acknowledge you were a Christian. There were places where you did not want to be identified as a Christian because it brought unnecessary attention to you that didn't allow you to live the way you wanted to live. Unfortunately, coming from a predominantly Muslim community, the part of Nigeria I come from right now is engulfed in the Boko Haram saga. And there are churches that I grew up in that are no longer there because they've been burnt down. There are practitioners of my faith that have been beheaded. There are those who have been persecuted. I think the worst part for me, living in the United States, feeling helpless about what my people are going through and not knowing how to help them. My grandmother's village was attacked 3 times when the Boko Haram saga was ongoing. I remember one of our distant cousins calling us and saying they had fled into the mountaintops because Boko Haram had overtaken the village, and they'd spent the night on the mountaintops and were afraid to come down. For me, that had to be the worst. Here I was sitting down in my cushy job, in my nice house, my nice car, and there was my family on a mountaintop, afraid to come down for fear of being killed. I guess living in the United States, I appreciate more what I have here as a Christian, that I can wake up and praise the Lord, that I can get up and go anywhere to worship without fear of reprisal, without fear that I would go into a church and not know if I was coming out that day, because maybe that is the church that has been slated to be burnt. And I'm thankful and grateful. But at the same time, I would want my brothers and sisters here in the United States to realize that unless we continue to stand in our faith and in what we believe in, someday it's a possibility that we too here will have to face what the churches in other parts of the world have faced. And my prayer is that if that moment ever came, that the cowardice with which I lived my initial first 22 years of life, where I was afraid to identify myself as Christian because I came from a predominantly Muslim community, that we will be able to stand and say, I'm a Christian. This is what I believe. And nothing, not even the fear of death, can take it away from me.
Amen. Thank you. Wow. That was